Okay, I'm very happy to have on the Goldstein on Gelt Show, Jack Tatar, who has written many books. Many of them are to do with end-of-life planning. In fact, the way that I discovered Jack was by reading an article he wrote on MarketWatch called How to Make End-of-Life Planning Easier. Jack, real pleasure to have you.
Doug, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So how can people make end-of-life planning easier?
Well, end-of-life planning requires a need for having real conversations between family members, and as well as incorporating the need to have professionals such as a financial professional and probably an estate planning legal expert involved. And I find the most difficult aspect of it is not so much working with the estate planning person who has the expertise or the financial planning person who has the expertise and the knowledge and typically the relationship, but it's getting that conversation started between the generations so that everything is worked out properly between generations and there's no unspoken expectations or anything else like that that comes into play at the wrong time after things have happened that I've seen in my experience has torn families apart.
Yes, I've seen that too. So let's dive right into one of the words you said, which was the importance of having conversations. And I'll tell you that I know it's difficult to have the conversations. As a financial advisor myself, I am also that guy you mentioned where the family comes to me and I speak with the parents and the children, the grown-up children about the conversations. But one of the things that I realize is that getting to that level is difficult. And frankly, even with my own parents, I'm very good at doing it professionally. But, when you have to approach your own parents and say, hey, we should talk about the problem of driving or the problem of safety in the house. Mm-hmm. It's awkward. What can people do before they get to the professional to bring their parents along to that conversation?
Well, it is very awkward, and I call it the talk. And in much the same way as your parents had the talk with you when you were younger, I put a lot of responsibility onto the adult children to say there's a need for you to have the talk with your parents. And invariably, I have found that we end up having the talk, but we end up having the talk too late. It's often towards the end when there's a lot of things that we can't do and a lot of changes we can't do, estate look backs and things like that, or there's certain expectations that this sibling was going to get that or that, and it's a little too close to the end. So I advise families to have the conversation sooner rather than later. And the optimal time to do it, I feel, is when you're either nearing or close to retirement, when you're really starting to think about what this next stage of life is going to look like. It's a great time to sit down with your parents, and even for the parents to promote the conversation and have the discussion at that point in time, so that you're having it, as I said, earlier rather than later, because most of us have the talk, but we just have it too late.
And what would happen, let's say, if people neglect to have the talk? What are some of the worst case scenarios that might arise?
Well, what I've seen happen, and this is it's interesting because whenever I bring this up to people and I mention this, everyone has a story. Everyone can say, this happened in my family. I don't speak to my brother anymore. I don't speak to my sister anymore because of something that really we didn't have the talk at the right time. So what ends up happening is not having the talk can tear families apart, and it can be over a small amount of money. It could be over some tchotchke that some sibling wanted in the house that was not planned for. It could be as simple as that. So not having the talk really tears families apart, as well as also it causes financial implications. It causes situations where if you don't do this planning, you don't do the talk, you can really end up giving away a lot of money to those people outside the family that you don't want to give that money to. So there's financial issues here as well. So it's the family issues and it's the financial issues that really become the worst case issues here.
We're talking with Jack Tatar, who wrote, among other books, Having the Talk, The 4 Keys to Your Parents' Safe Retirement. And I think that Jack has really been pointing out some critical issues, which is that it is important to get your parents talking, or if you're the parents, it's time around when you retire that you need to begin talking with your children about dealing not only with health and money, but how you're going to pass things on to the next generation. So, Jack, let's look at some of these specific issues that people should start talking about. Where would you open up the conversation?
Well, I think that, you asked earlier, how do you have this talk and how do you have this conversation? And it is an uncomfortable conversation for people. I have found one of the best ways to do this is, rather than being direct and saying to your parents or saying to your children, we need to sit down and talk about this, and kind of you get the walls up and everything else. I have found that some of the best ways to do this is to just bring up stories or situations that have happened. And I've had success stories with people who have said, I had the talk with my mom or dad because I referred to something that happened to our uncle Sam or something, who had a situation where now his family isn't talking to each other because they didn't have the talk. So a lot of times you can bring in personal situations that you've seen from friends and outside family to say to your mom and dad, look, I don't want to have happen what happened to you and us, what happened to Uncle Sam and his family. Mm-hmm. I think that a lot of people, if they look around them, they can see those situations where things haven't gone well, where they haven't planned on long-term care, where they haven't planned on making sure that the estate is transferred properly, and bringing up those points to say, I don't want that to happen to us. I want to make sure that we keep our family together. I want to make sure that all your wishes for your finances are done according to what you want, not what the government wants, and therefore let's have that conversation. So a lot of times it's drawing on that past experience, but sitting down and then, like you said, what are the things to talk about? Financial is there as well, but it's also, I find the best question is asking your mom and dad, or for your mom and dad to say, this is what I want. This is what my wishes are, because invariably it's the parents' money. It's things that they've worked hard for. What are your wishes? What do you want? That is a real good starting point, rather than saying, let's take a look at your finances. Let's take a look at your property. What do you want?
That's a great, that's critical. That actually goes back to what you had said earlier, Jack, which was go to a professional or an estate planning attorney or a financial planner, because we hear thousands of these stories. We can actually really find stories. And I guess this is a lot of what I do when I talk to people, is I'll listen to what's going on with them. And usually I have somewhere in my bag of tricks an actual story. And usually it's pretty recent, of what happened when someone didn't do that and the consequences. So a lot of the people that I talk to, and a lot of the listeners to the Goldstein on Gelt Show, are cross-border. They have, frankly, a lot of our listeners are people in America, and they may have family or children living in Israel. Any special issues you think should be brought up or discussed when it's a cross-border relationship?
Well, there are things that are involved there. I just want to come back to one thing that you mentioned, Doug, which is the fact that having a professional such as yourself is very important, because I have found that a lot of times that professional can act as an intermediary and as a person to kind of bring families together. And if family has a relationship with a financial professional such as yourself, and you've shown that you've taken care of the family, that allows you to kind of bring the families together and have these discussions. So I think it's very important that you have that professional who's involved in these conversations. A lot of times they can drive it. But to your question about cross-border issues, I think there's a lot of them that are involved, and I think a lot of this will require people to take a look at exactly what the situations are that are out there and based in the countries. And this is, once again, where a professional can come into place, whether it's a professional who's a estate planning specialist or a financial planning specialist. When you have situations like this, where you have potentially families in the U.S., families in Israel, maybe even some joint citizenship issues, it's very important to take those into consideration, because you have different laws in terms of tax lifetime exclusion amounts that vary between countries. So what we're seeing is a lot of people are starting to work with either doing a will in each country or to do something that's even been known as a geographic will, something that covers both of no matter where the country is. But what's very important is you need to understand the laws in whatever countries there are that are involved, whether you have your accounts in the U.S., accounts in Israel, but also understanding that if the family who is going to be passed on the finances is in the U.S., some of those exclusion laws, some of those financial requirements could be different in the U.S. than they are in Israel. So now you're not dealing with just an expert who knows one country. You need to work with an expert who understands both countries. And so there's a lot of them there. It's interesting you mentioned it. I just tweeted out this morning a very good paper that I saw on estate planning for cross-border families out there. So there's not a lot out there on it, but it behooves you to speak to a specialist who's aware of all these laws that are out there.
Well, I can tell you, I know for a fact there is an ever-growing pool of information out there because I'm writing a lot of it on my corporate website. I write all the time about issues of cross-border investing. Some of the big ones, and especially we see like you're talking about when it's generational transfer, is that people-owned brokerage accounts in America, and the American brokerage firms say to the Israeli children, they say, well, listen, even though you're maybe an American citizen, because you don't have a U.S. address, you can't have an account with us.
Right.
So then people wrongly think, oh my goodness, I can't have an account. And this is something that I've been telling people, literally for years and writing about, is that there's no law against it. You just have to work with a firm that is happy to work with cross-border investors and families who have addresses overseas, but who still want to keep their brokerage accounts or an IRA. When you have an IRA, you don't have to take the money out of your parents' IRA when they die. You can put it into a stretch IRA, but you still have to keep it in America. So exactly what you're saying, which is there are a lot of complications and a lot of details that a specialist in the cross-border world would know about. Jack, I see we're just about out of time, but we've only covered a fraction of what I know that you teach about. So tell me in the last few seconds, how can people follow you and follow your work and learn more about what you teach?
Well, I appreciate that, Doug. And if you go to my website, which is safe4retirement.com, and that's a safe, S-A-F-E, and the number 4, retirement.com, you'll see information on myself and my books. I invite you to take a look at my book, which is called Having the Talk, The 4 Keys to Your Parents' Safe Retirement, which outlines a lot of ways to have the discussion between family members. And for those of you who are listening to the show today, if you go to the website, havingthetalkbook.com, you can actually download a free copy, and I don't even ask for emails or anything else, so please go and download it, and it's on my book called What's the Deal with Having the Talk Between Adult Children and Their Parents, and that's for any of your listeners out there today.
Jack, we really appreciate that, and we will put links to all of that at the show notes of today's show at goldsteinongelt.com. Jack Tatar, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world. If you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.